In the 1950s, there was more of a focus on the emerging Cold War than there was for a domestic agenda and social reforms. During this time, though, there were serious social problems. So, the question arose of how do we break this lethargy of the 1950s? The solution, as voted in by the American people, was John F. Kennedy. Throughout his presidency, Kennedy shifted more and more to the left, and the civil rights movement was the deciding factor that pushed JFK towards social reform due to the bus boycotts, murder of Emmett Till, and many other factors. Kennedy was also focused on unemployment and opportunity at the time, so he passed the Manpower Development Training Act of 1962 and the Area Redevelopment Agency, both of which were heavily criticized and proved to be unsuccessful. Kennedy was successful in revamping policy and breaking the stagnation of the 50s. His position allowed for Lyndon B. Johnson to pursue social reform, so in came LBJ. Johnson's administration was able to have great success and was able to gain wide support. However, Johnson had a flaw of perhaps striving for goals that were too ambitious, as seen with a few of his early policy decisions, including a tax cut that caused his administration to be strapped for cash, deciding to go to war in Vietnam, and the expansion of domestic reforms despite fiscal constraints. One of Johnson's most significant pieces of legislation was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. During this presidency, the Supreme Court also played a significant role in expanding civil rights and liberties. LBJ also signed Medicare and Medicaid and brought federal aid into education, began the war on poverty. However, a lot of these domestic successes were sabotaged by poor budgeting decisions. Also, his decisions with the Vietnam War were proving to be increasingly problematic, causing his approval ratings to dip dangerously low. Beyond the policy reform for African Americans amidst the civil rights movement, there were several other vulnerable populations in the 1960s. As this Rosie the Riveter women in the workforce era emerged, new problems for women arose along with it, along with gay persons, Latinos, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and people of color in urban ghettos were all facing severe oppression during this time as well. The profession of social work was also dramatically influenced throughout the 1960s, especially due to the war on poverty. It was actually a rather controversial profession because many people thought that social workers were being too conservative with their influence. So, in conclusion, there was considerable progress made in this time period, but still many issues left unsettled by the time Johnson left office. We were able to learn from this great society time period that it is important for the president to be focused on both domestic and foreign policy. This time also provided three key additions to the welfare state: civil rights legislation, discretionary federal programs such as the Head Start program, and entitlements such as Medicare and Medicaid.